Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful, Rabbit Hole King, Dia, Lord and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. Square Enix has just sold off EIDOS, Crystal Dynamics, and Square Enix Montreal, teams that they've spent millions of dollars and a decade building up in the West, being this forefront of their game development technologies. These are the people behind like the Marvel partnership, the Deus Ex reboot, the Tomb Raider reboot, all gone, just sold to Embracer, the people who own THQ Nordic, I think, who I think might be a major player in Western video game development going forward, or won't be considering the state of Darksiders 3. But Square Enix is selling things off in order to fund investments for blockchain. This isn't me being like, and NFTs. Like, this isn't me being like conspiratorial. This isn't me being like making shit up. They have outright given statements about this. Like, they are using this money from selling these video game studios to fund their investments into other projects. Square Enix, I think, is dead. They are observing other avenues to accumulate revenue. They are moving away from video games, and they're going to try more and more and more to milk their hardcore, die-hard fans. Like, I just heard a couple of weeks ago about like them selling Terra figures for like $10,000 or some shit, and people spurging out about it because they were expecting only to have to pay $3,000. Like, the prices are going up and up and up, and the value is going down, 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 down. What do you get out of buying a $10,000 Terra figure? Like I get that she's a legendary character, and I would have preferred to have her in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate rather than Cloud, but water under the bridge. Like she's not worth. I wouldn't put $10,000 dues on a fucking Terra figurine. Like I love Terra, but I don't love anything that much. Like $10,000, I wouldn't pay like a tenth of that price for that, bro. Like, you are 100th even, I would say. Like, I wouldn't even pay for Amiibo. Like, shit, like that is a scam. Like, I think that shit kind of thing is a scam. Like, what do they? Square Enix, I think, is in the middle of establishing itself in putting itself in a new dark age, right? Like, they don't have Kingdom Hearts 3 to look forward to anymore. Final Fantasy is dead. They've basically said they've killed off every franchise that isn't Final Fantasy because it doesn't put in enough sales. Like, Kingdom Hearts 4 won't be any good. There's no optimism for that at all. Like, The World's Ends With You, the sequel to that, complete blip on everyone's radar. The only people defending that game are hardcore fanboys or dudes who have a thing for goth chicks wearing hoodies. You have Final Fantasy Strangers of Paradise didn't do well. People aren't into like the new action game focus of modern Final Fantasy games. Like, games like Triangle Strategy, although they're good, like, are minor successes in the grand scheme of thing, I think, in which Square Enix is clearly on the decline. They have been since Final Fantasy VII, since they accepted that exclusivity deal with Sony, which led to the bankruptcy of the company in 5 years, the merger with Enix, between Squaresoft and Enix, and just led these two legendary companies down this 20-year long downward spiral of just not able to produce anything of value. That ActRaiser remake was shit. Like, Dragon Quest XI in a lot of ways felt like a rehash of 8. Like, there are, like, Dragon Quest 12, I think people are going to have problems with. Like, the list goes on and on and on. Like, Square Enix, I think, is kind of gaining a reputation for having some of the most senile, out of touch executives in gaming. People always love to say Nintendo has that, which is not and never has been true. Like, Iwata was a game dev, right? But but like, when it comes to Square Enix, I think it is true, right? Because we keep hearing these stories about them like relocating their headquarters because like some fortune teller, me as a fortune teller told an executive to do it. Like you have like them spending a decade on Final Fantasy 15, uh, having it come out and be a complete disaster. Like they are Balan Wonderworld, everything associated with that game. Like they put out some of the biggest disasters in video game history in the past 10 years, and I don't think most people are really giving them enough credit. Like people are not acknowledging the way they're handling their business. Like Nier Automata blew up, right? Like what do you do in that situation? Do you like make sequels? Do you get Yoko Taro to produce new IPs? Do you get like Platinum Games to fund Platinum Games to like finish Scalebound or some shit? Like cut a deal to make it come out in PlayStation as well. Like what do? You remake the first game, make an iOS spin-off, and that's it. Like you don't do anything new with that franchise, and now I think 5 years after launch, it's all but forgotten. Like there are a handful of people who are still like rabid about Nier Automata, but for the most part, the IP is completely dead in the water. It will never get a follow-up game. It'll never get a sequel. Yoko Taro, went from being one of those beloved RTOR game devs to being like this guy that's almost a complete joke. Because what has he produced in the past 5 years? You know what I mean? Like I'm seeing these other developers put out like games regularly, and yet this guy hasn't produced anything. Like again, it's probably not his fault, right? It's probably entirely on Square Enix for not understanding what they had. Is that like people wanted like waifu androids fighting in like a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and they couldn't like improve on that idea. They couldn't do anything with that. It's a complete joke, right? Like the idea sold itself, literally sold itself, because like the PS4 had no games. Um, you know, Games have been getting less sexualized, which puts off a lot of the audience, and like there just was nothing to play, and so people tried Automata and liked it because they have no real experience with action games or games like it, and they could have like really capitalized that. They could have really fine-tuned the process. They really could have like, okay, next time we're gonna make a game where every character is like a cute android waifu or some shit who's like, and they spend like hundreds of years like fighting each other or some shit. Like after the extinction of mankind, like android waifus will continue fighting. Like that's all they need to do. But no, no, they completely dropped the ball on the opportunity. They didn't build off the IP, and now the fanboys have moved on to new things. They are hyped about something else, right? Um, Tomb Raider was in the same boat, right? Like they could have really built off Tomb Raider. They could have really done a lot with the reboot. And I am a legit fan of the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot. But what happened, all right? Rise of the Tomb Raider uh, alienated a lot of people by being a console exclusive, coming out on Xbox 360 and Xbox One, and never coming to Nintendo platforms. And the Shadow of the Tomb Raider is just a rehash, right? Like I would say both sequels are rehashes, but like it was remarkable to me how like all three of these games felt like worse versions of each other as they went along. They got worse and worse with each iteration, with like no real innovation or no real creativity put into it. Like Crystal Dynamics could have done a great job with this IP. The Marvel partnership, right? How do you take the most lucrative film IP in history and completely shit all over it? Like, how exactly do you put out a video game in the wake of Avengers Endgame? The most popular thing ever, right? I think everyone says Infinity War is better. I don't watch game shit. I don't watch this shit. I have standards. But like, how do you form a partnership with the biggest IP in the world, one of the biggest IPs in the world, and somehow fail to capitalize it? You put out the Avengers game, which I think was a games as a service, alienated all of its players before it came out because by the sheer nature of it, you put out like the Guardians of the Galaxy game, and nobody cares about the Guardians of the Galaxy. They are completely irrelevant. I have no idea who they are. Never will know who they are. I don't care about them. You have what else did they put out even? Uh, were there other games in that lineup? I don't quite remember. Um, but basically they announced all these big ambitious projects with like the Marvel license, right? Like they got the license, the likeness for the actors, they got like the sets, they got everything right? Like they got the tone, and they completely botched it due to the way they handled the actual game development, to the point where like even the most hardcore fanboys would not touch them. Like even someone with as low standards as Angry Joe would not give the Avengers game a positive review. I don't even think he covered like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like the Avengers game killed all enthusiasm the fanboys would have had for a Marvel Cinematic Gaming Universe, right? The MGU, like fuck the MCU, the MGU that would have generated like far more revenue than any of the movies, and they completely botched it. And now they're selling off the teams that made these games. Congratulations, Square. You have put yourself in a corner. And let it be known, I don't want this to be forgotten, let it be known that it all started in 1997 when you foolishly decided to sign an exclusivity contract with Sony Entertainment to make Final Fantasy VII a PlayStation exclusive. You should have stayed on Nintendo hardware.